Hi, welcome to the Bee's Business, or welcome back if you've been here before, and welcome specifically to my children's literature review series that I've recently launched on my channel. Through this series, I hope to help fellow educators and parents discover titles in children's literature that are meaningful, inspirational, educational, or a combination of these. Additionally, in an effort to keep my reviews consistent, I follow the same 5-step process every time I review a book. In step 1, I summarize the text in a couple of sentences. In step 2, I share the things that I really enjoy about the book. In step 3, I share any constructive criticism I have. In step 4, I summarize my review. And in step 5, I rate the book on a 1 to 10 scale, with 1 being the lowest rating and 10 being the highest. And on occasion, I throw in a 6th step to my review process. The 6th step involves my own children, and they get an opportunity to rate the text after we have read it together. Today I am reviewing my first biography in this series, Margaret and the Moon, How Margaret Hamilton Saved the First Lunar Landing, by Dean Roberts and illustrated by Lucy Knisley. Prior to visiting my local library and discovering this text, I had never heard of Margaret Hamilton, but I have got to say that I am very thankful I stumbled across this text. It wasn't one that I was actually planning to search for, to feature in my review series, but I couldn't find the ones that I was specifically looking for, and so this one jumped out at me and I gave it a shot, and I'm very glad I did. This biography follows Margaret Hamilton from the time that she was young through her days working with NASA. The opening text of this biography really sets the stage when it says, Margaret Hamilton loved to solve problems. She came up with ideas no one had ever thought of before. The story goes on to share some very relatable experiences, such as wondering why girls don't play baseball, and the text says Margaret has a solution, and her solution, join the baseball team herself. The text really puts emphasis on the fact that she studied hard in all subject areas. In the text, we also learn that her father was a poet and a philosopher, and through this we learned that he had a big impact on her as she was growing up. The text includes a couple of scientific facts, mostly related to the universe and how far the sun is from Earth and a few things like that, and they are sandwiched into the story in a very fluid way. They flow, and you almost wouldn't even realize that you're reading factual information. As we continue to read the story, we go on to learn about Margaret's joining NASA. Margaret became a director of software programming for NASA, and she ended up working on the Apollo 8, 9, 10, and 11 missions. So through Margaret's experience, we also end up learning a lot about the Apollo mission, specifically Apollo 11, which was the mission where they were trying to put a human on the moon. To summarize the ending of the text without giving too much away, Margaret ends up being a big hero in saving the Apollo 11 mission with her hard work when something goes a little bit astray. At the very end of the text, we circle back around to one of the first few pages, and on this page, Margaret was gazing at the night sky in wonder. And as we make our way to the very back of the book, the last line says, as always, she gazed at the night sky in wonder. I appreciate that the author looped back around to the beginning and made that connection. It reminds us that while the Apollo 11 mission was really a very important thing that she did, there are other important things she's going to continue to do through her future wanderings. In the very back of the book, we have some actual images of Margaret at different stages in her life. We see her when she is a young child, we see her when she's at MIT, we see her working in an Apollo command module, we see her as a child, and we see her with her code, which is a giant stack. An additional thing that will be learned through this text is a little bit about code and coding and what that means. Some of my favorite things about this text include that facts are just sprinkled in all throughout, and you don't even really realize that you're reading facts. But I appreciate that not only are we learning about Margaret, but we are also learning about things that were relevant to her life. It just makes her story feel more complete, and I think we feel more connected to her as the reader. I think in the beginning of the text it was a really smart move on the author's part to have some very relatable topics for young readers, from talking about daddy long legs to baseball. I appreciate that the author highlighted Margaret's relationship with her father in the text because I think that's a big part of her story. I love this page where we are getting to see the constellations. That is yet another little chunk of information we are learning throughout this text. My children and I spent quite a while on this page as we were reading this book together because they were hunting around looking for different constellations. The names of the constellations are included, so just another way that we have some facts and knowledge packed into this text. The amount of writing on each page is really pretty minimal, but the illustrations that go along with the writing are quite powerful, and I always appreciate when the text of a book and the illustrations both bring a lot to the reader. I think the author made some other really great choices in making the book feel exciting to readers of all different ages. On this page we have a countdown going on. My kids and I read the countdown together, which was a lot of fun, and then we had a big celebration that was a little bit louder than the rest of the reading as we said lift off, so that added some excitement to the text. At the end of the text, I really appreciate that we get to see some real-life images of Margaret. I love the illustrations that the illustrator created, but getting to see the real deal is always a nice treat. I will note that this text does come with a dust jacket when you purchase the hard copy edition. I just chose to take it off for this review so there was a little bit less glare going on and it was easier for me to present the text to you. Overall, there are quite a few things that I really enjoy about this text. Moving along to constructive criticism, I don't have a ton of constructive criticism. I think the only area that I would have liked to have seen handled slightly differently by the author is here in this section where Margaret is discovering computers. My children were rather confused, and my daughter actually said she'd never seen computers before in a very baffled way. So in my daughter's mind, she's living in a world where computers are all over the place. She uses them at school, she sees them here at home in the hands of her parents, and she's immersed in a world where technology is very prevalent. So it was hard for her to understand that Margaret was living in a different time and computers were not as common for Margaret. And the copyright of this text is 2017, so it was created more recently, so I think there could have been an easy way to make it clear that Margaret discovering computers was because computers were just really coming onto the scene, and it wasn't because Margaret had just been living in a world where there weren't computers around her, even though there were computers in other places. So that's my only real criticism for the text. If that could have just been a little more clear, I think that would have benefited readers, not only my daughter, but other readers as well. And that is the only piece of constructive criticism I have for this text. In summary, I really enjoy this text. I think it's a great way to introduce us to Margaret Hamilton if we did not already know who she is, and also a great way to introduce us to some other scientific information that is relevant to Margaret's life, from coding to the Apollo missions, even to a couple of facts like the distance between Earth and the Sun and things of that nature. So it's jam-packed with not only biographical information about Margaret, but also some scientific information, and I feel like every page of the text is really delivering a lot of goodness to the reader. I think Margaret's life was really successfully covered in this text. We didn't delve too far into her young childhood years, but it wasn't really relevant to the purpose of this text, so I think that was fitting. And now for the rating. I'm going to rate this text a 9.5 out of 10. As I mentioned in the beginning, it isn't a book that was on my radar to feature in my review series, but I am thankful I came across it, and also thankful that I was able to share it with my children. They were definitely interested in this text and all of the information that it held. Thank you so much for joining me for another review here on my Children's Literature Review series. As always, I appreciate you spending some time on my channel. I hope that you'll subscribe and stick around so you won't miss any future reviews that I add to this series. I welcome any feedback that you may have about how I am reviewing these texts. I'm always open to making changes if it benefits my audience, so just let me know what are the things that I'm doing that you enjoy during these reviews, and is there anything that you feel like I could do differently to make them even better. Again, thank you so much for being here. I can't wait to see you in the next one. Bye!